From To Keto LLC, it's Keto Woman Podcast with Daisy Brackenhall.
Hello, Keto lovelies. I'm Daisy Brackenhall, and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence, and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight, after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. Keto has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman Podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs to 20 grams or less per day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds, and the incidental carbs you find in things like dairy. Moderate protein, scale to your lean body mass, and then fat to satiety. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalised keto. I'll be asking my guest each week what their keto looks like to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we can't give you medical advice. It's always best to work with your own doctor because they know you and your medical history, and so have access to the bigger picture. This week's extraordinary woman is Suzie Edge. Suzie is a junior doctor based in Scotland, where she works in orthopaedic surgery. After an earlier degree in molecular and cell biology, Suzie joined a graduate programme at the medical school in Aberdeen. But within a year of graduating and starting life as a doctor, she was pregnant with her first daughter. Despite lots of karate training, playing rugby and being in the Territorial Army, and despite eating the prescribed healthy diet, Suzie gradually put on more and more weight. Suzie discovered low carb after her brother gave her a copy of The Diet Delusion by Gary Taubes. That's Good Calories, Bad Calories in the US. And though she believed in the possibilities of low carb, she didn't fully commit until earlier this year. Since doing so, she's lost 28 pounds and 4 inches from her waist. Suzie is now back into martial arts and is currently also studying for a master's in modern history of medicine, learning to research and to write in a non-clinical setting, which may lead to a book about lifestyle medicine and the future of the NHS. It felt a bit like Suzie and I had sorted out all the dietary world's ills by the time we had finished recording. If only we could wave a magic wand and bend the world to our way of thinking tomorrow. Welcome, Suzie, to the Keto Women Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing brilliantly, Daisy. Thanks so much for asking me to come and join you. It was a bit of a surprise when you said come and have a chat, but I'm just really happy to be here and to see you as well.
And great to have another Brit on the show. It always gives me a little thrill to get another Brit on the show.
Absolutely. I hope you weren't expecting a Scottish accent there when I first started speaking to you. You said, "Oh no, you hang on a minute. That's not an accent from Scotland." Sorry about that.
That's right, because you live in Scotland, but you're obviously not Scottish.
No, I have lived here over half my life, I think. I came up to the university when I was 18 rather, and I've been here ever since. I didn't want to leave.
You must feel Scottish, really, as much as English now.
Yeah, I mean, my mother is from Scotland, actually, and although my dad wasn't. But my kids were born here, and I've been here a long time. But this month, obviously, we're supporting England.
Aha.
Sorry to bring that up.
And what are the biggest differences? Because people talk about, and I've got some Scottish friends, and hearing what they say about different things about the way of life in Scotland, there does seem to be quite a big difference between things that go on in Scotland and England and Wales and Ireland, I guess. But there seems to be a real marked difference with that northern border. I mean, the health system's very different. The education system, the housing market, all seems very different.
Absolutely. The difference, as you say, the differences in health, education, in law. I mean, there are very marked differences as soon as you go over the border in all of those things, and how the health system is funded, how the education system has its own ways of doing things. There's just an attitude difference. It's quite hard to describe. In some things, the Scottish, I find them very laid back, and in other things, I find them crazy over the top. But the politics is very different. It's quite hard to describe, but I certainly feel it. Certainly feel it when I come down to England, which I do during the kids' holidays mostly. I come down. My parents live down here. I'm here just now, hence here. But it is a different kind of place. I was told when I first went up to Scotland, I went to a pub with my rugby friends in the Borders, and I was actually told not to speak because they didn't want me to be beaten up. And it was quite funny because I started pretending to be Welsh and then realised that a Welsh rugby team were in the club as well, so I had no chance. But yeah, I was told not to talk and not to wear my England rugby shirts. That's a very bad idea.
Right. Well, that is a bit provocation, I guess, if because we do have this rivalry, don't we? But all the Scots I know are very kind and warm and friendly.
Yeah, I mean, I as I said, I came up to Scotland and I stayed, and maybe that wouldn't maybe have happened if things were different.
Exactly, that says a lot, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. Yeah. When I came up, I didn't expect to stay. I was just off to go and see a little bit of the world, and then I was going to go and see another bit of the world. But I met my now husband after a few years here, and yeah, we stayed. Don't really want to go anywhere else just now.
And he has an interesting sideline, I believe, doesn't he? You mentioned to me when we spoke a bit before by email that he's part of a mountain rescue team. Yeah,
so he's an accountant by day, and then spends the rest of his time up in the mountains. We have a house in Braemar, which has a mountain rescue team, and he spends a lot of time doing that. And he disappears off, and sometimes he gets calls in the middle of the night and has to go very quickly. And my job is to jump up and make him something to take to eat. So I just cringe horribly when I'm there making his jam sandwiches, which is his favourite thing. It's his favourite thing to take with him because, I don't know why. I'll ask him one day what's that about, but all the energy apparently.
And I guess that's the thing, they're on call, they get called out whenever someone needs rescuing.
That's right, yeah.
Which I guess is more often than not in conditions that aren't favourable, so middle of the night or bad weather.
Absolutely, yeah, like really, they had a couple of tough ones this last winter. It was very snowy, very cold, and they were out in the middle of the night in pretty horrific conditions, quite a few times actually. Although I got a phone call, Sunday night's quite a common time because it's the weekend and people have been out. And he had a phone call last night, I think, and he wasn't too impressed because he'd been out in the hills himself all weekend.
Oh no.
Yeah, but that's...
You could have got lost while I was up there already.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But he absolutely loves doing that, and it's something that I quite like the idea of. And as a medic, I could get involved, but actually with the family that's quite difficult because there's no point in training and kitting both of us.
No,
because only one of us would ever be able to go. Yeah, and that's his thing, and he loves doing that, so I'll leave him to do that on his own.
So you say he takes jam sandwiches. It doesn't sound like you've managed to get him on board with keto then.
Not quite. I mean, I do all the shopping and I do all the cooking in the house, but he joins in mostly with that. He actually says he's just happy to be fed. So meal times, he'll eat what I prepare, and I prepare keto meals. And he's, since I've started doing this, he's lost half a stone. He's really chuffed about that, although he's pretty skinny to begin with. Although I keep telling him now he's probably fat on the inside. But yeah, he does. I think he's going to fight. He does keep saying to me, let's do this. I'll just join you. But then it comes to maybe he gets a call from the rescue team and he says, right, what do I take? Actually, that's quite a difficult thing to get to do because the things that I don't eat, the breads, the jams, the chocolate bars, the bottles of Lucozade, are the things that actually travel well in a rucksack.
Mm-hmm.
And, a steak in butter with broccoli tends not to. So I haven't got my head around that yet. I haven't got my head around how I might help him do that. And I think that'll come, because he is interested. Says to me that he sees the difference in me in a lot of ways, and he's interested in being part of that, I suppose. There's the other aspect of the fact that the kids, I want to be able to help the kids in the same way, but I'm finding that very difficult as well. They eat what I eat with meal times, but it's what goes on the rest of the time that I'm finding quite tough.
Yes, and what happens at school and with their friends and things, presumably.
Yeah. And I know I was listening to one of your podcasts recently with, is it Danielle and Erica, the Have Butter Will Travel lasses? It was brilliant. And they were saying that how difficult it must be when you're the one in the house eating keto and everyone else around you isn't. And actually, I don't find it difficult for me at all. Like, I just see the stuff and I go, nah, not interested, because I know how it's going to make me feel. I just don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. I think I celebrated 10, which this is crazy, and people do this. I know. I celebrated 10 weeks of keto by having a chocolate eclair, and I thought, what was that about? That was bland. I didn't like that. But yeah, it's all there in the house, but I don't touch it, and it's less and less there. Once the pasta's gone, I don't buy any more, and the kids just eat what I give them. Mm-hmm. But it's a tough thing, and what I was saying about Danielle and Erica, they were saying, how difficult it must be and cooking for someone else. And actually I just don't want the stuff. Just no desire to eat it at all, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, if your mindset can be like that, because I must admit, and I don't know, I guess I'd find a way through it if I was in that situation. But because I live alone, I can get the house completely clear of all that stuff. So it's not under my nose. It's not tempting me. And I do struggle when I visit family and things and all that stuff is there. But I guess maybe if it was on a day-to-day basis, I'd find a way and I'd be like you. But I must admit, I'm always envious of these people who do manage to make this complete switch in their brain, and so they just don't want it. Because if you just don't want it, that's the end of the problem. That you haven't got the cravings, you haven't got to stop yourself from having those things. It's a wonderful place to be.
I think it's fascinating, but what's really fascinating about it is that switch and that absolute deadline day happened to me, and I've not been interested in any of it since. And that was sort of, I think, 17 weeks ago now. But before that, it took me 8 years to get to that position of.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So going back a bit, I've liked the idea of a low carb diet for probably since Gary Taubes published his first, the book, The Diet Delusion. Mm-hmm. My brother gave me a copy of that when it was published, and I read it when it was published. And I've always said, I think that's great. That's what I believe in, but I never did it. Although I did do it because I was buying, I'd go on Amazon or whatever and I'd buy keto sticks. I don't even think Amazon was around when I first went looking for them. So I'd have them there in my bathroom, and I'd wake up on a Monday morning and I'd have bacon and eggs, and I'd get to a point where I was turning those sticks purple, and I'd go, yay, I'm in ketosis. Everyone around me would be like, well, what's that about? By Wednesday or Thursday, because I guess, and what I didn't realize at the time is that I was starting to really miss the carbs. I was withdrawing, and it was all around me in the house, and I'd just go back to them and start again on Monday. And I literally did that for probably 8 years, on and off, on and off, on and off, and my weight just went up and up and up and up.
I guess it's that sort of slightly sort of half-assed, when you're not completely in and you still get those cravings. And I was thinking that actually with what you were saying about your husband going out with his jam sandwiches. And it's the same thing with athletes who make that switch, because they're used to being in a position where they need to get some instant energy, and they get that instant energy. And like you were saying, with the portability and all the rest of it, of that kind of food, they're used to that. They're used to getting the energy they need to do the job they're doing or the sport they're doing or whatever. And they start doing keto and they see some benefits, but they're going to have to go through a period of, not just the withdrawal, but that getting used to it. And with athletes, with a downturn maybe in their performance until their body adapts and they start picking up again. And I think it's that transition period that's that's like a withdrawal period, but there's that awful carb withdrawal, the keto flu that people often get in the first week, but a sort of lower level with this sort of practicality side of it that can eke on for a while and just make that transition difficult, that at some point you've just got to bite the bullet and find a replacement for it, and go with those few times that doesn't give you the energy you were looking for or whatever, and until you get to that magic moment like you were mentioning, where you don't want it or need it anymore.
What I did find as well was that when I did have that moment where I thought enough's enough, at that point I went back online and I went back to reading, and suddenly I'd found this community had built up of other people doing the same thing. And suddenly there was someone to talk to about it all. And I wasn't just me being mad trying this crazy thing that wasn't working for me for years and years and years. Suddenly all these other people were there as well. And that was a huge help to actually make me to realize that there was such a thing as keto flu, or that I might have to get through certain aspects of not just the craving, as you say, but also the withdrawal, but also of the practicalities and how I might organize myself for instance, going to work or other things like traveling down to see my parents this weekend. That was classic me stopping at a service station every 5 yards, buying chocolate and coffee and more chocolate and more coffee because I was driving and it was stressful.
Exactly. It does take some thought, doesn't it?
Definitely. And they were laughing at me when I got here because I sort of came into the house with my boxes full of bacon and nuts and things like that. But then they looked me up and down and said, wow, why not?
Exactly, if it's working. So we've drifted into the sort of middle section, really. So
yeah,
let's go back to where you were before and what got you to that point of thinking that you needed to make a change, or like you said, when your brother gave you that book and you read it and you thought, well, this has got to be a better way. But, why was it? What was going on in your life that you needed to make a change?
I was always bigger than my classmates. I suppose that's the best way to put it. I wasn't huge as a kid, but I was always bigger and aware that I was a bit bigger. But it never really bothered me because it didn't get in the way of what I wanted to do. And I was very sporty, and it never stopped me from doing that. I wasn't competing. I was playing school sports and club sports and what have you, but it didn't get in the way. And as I said to you there as well, I was academic, and, that doesn't get in the way of sitting at a desk and writing essays. So these things were not affected at all by it. And so that was fine. And as a teenager, I started doing karate, and I just adored that. I was always training for hours on end, and it didn't get in the way of that. And then I found rugby. And of course, the amazing thing about rugby is that the one thing I've always loved about rugby is that there's a place on the pitch for everyone, no matter what size or shape or, fast or lumbering, there's a place. And I fitted into that very well. And it didn't matter that I was a big girl, because actually there were bigger girls around on that rugby pitch. So I never felt that it was a problem.
I was going to say, it's almost a prerequisite for rugby, isn't it? Rugby players in general tend to be, a bit more solid and strong, and because they're powerhouses, and they need
They have ridiculously large BMIs, but we won't go there. But so I fitted into that really well. And, but of course, along with that comes the beer drinking and all that sort of social aspect as well. But I just wasn't affected in that way. It was fine. I just got on with it. I was in the, I played rugby. When I got to university, I just played rugby. I don't actually remember much of my degree because I think I was just playing rugby the whole time. And I don't know how I got a 2-1. I have no idea how. You can ask me about, interestingly enough, there was a lot of, I did a degree in molecular cell biology, and there was a department in our university who was studying insulin, and there was a department in the university who was studying Alzheimer's, and I did a lot of work around those two departments. Can't remember any of it at all.
Oh no, that would be really interesting to remember all that now.
It would. I thought, I did a degree in this. Where's it gone? Well, it went on the rugby pitch and it went in the pub, I think. But that's fine. It's gone. It was a long time ago anyway. But But at university, I was the same. I was just very fit. And then I went to medical school, and medical school's actually quite hard. So there were no team sports anymore because I couldn't commit.
But you didn't have the time.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to let people down by not committing. And so I started doing individual sports, running and cycling. But again, not competing, but just for fun. But I just, all the time, just getting a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. And then after I graduated, actually the year I graduated, I was pregnant with my first daughter. And she's 10 now. And after she was born, that just started to get worse and worse. And always eating healthily, always on the low-fat yogurts and always on the Special K and for breakfast, and always on, those things which now I look at and think, what? But that was the healthy diet, wasn't it? That was what you.
Oh, do you remember that? Was it? I think it was Special K that led it. The Special K challenge.
Yeah.
I can't think how. Yeah, it was all about replacing 2 meals a day with a bowl of cereal, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and skimmed milk.
Incredible. Yeah. It's incredible looking back on that, isn't it?
Special K for breakfast and lunch with skimmed milk. Yeah, it is. It really is. I don't think I ever did that, to be honest.
No, I didn't.
But I certainly would eat it for breakfast. It's probably one of the only things I didn't do.
I've never really liked cereal, so yeah.
Yeah, it was something that we just ate because that's what you have for breakfast. I'm not sure I particularly enjoyed it. Maybe I'm just looking at it now thinking, yeah, I never liked that anyway. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, that, always the healthy diet, always carrying on with my sports, and it just never get it. It didn't really start to bother me until after the kids were born, and then my weight started to go up and up and up. And I was at work one night. This is my very first year as a junior doctor, and it was before I was pregnant, so it was very early on. And I remember it so clearly. I was sitting in a high dependency unit and having a chat about weight, and because that's what always happens when you sit down with other health professionals, it always turns to what we're eating and how we all want to lose weight. And I said, I just need to exercise more and stop eating so much rubbish. And they said, well, what are you eating? And it was all, healthy diet. And I was, at this point, I decided that I wanted to do an Ironman. So I was exercising quite a lot. I never did it. I was exercising quite a lot. And this nurse, and I'd love to know who it was. I can't remember who it was now, but she turned around to me and she said, do you believe that? I said, what do I believe? Calories in, calories out. Of course I do. It's simple. It's basic. It's obvious. And she went, yeah, okay. And that was the end of the conversation. But it just, we never chatted more than that. And I don't know where it came from her point of view. But it just sowed a little seed. And always I was beginning to think, well, hang on a minute. What's going on here? This isn't quite right. I'm doing what I'm told to do.
Because you're yet another poster girl for doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You're eating healthily. You're eating the, the, what is it called? The eat well plate. And, you're according to the food pyramid and all the rest of it. You're eating according to that. And you're not just moving more, but, you're doing more than moderate exercise by the sounds of it. You're exercising quite a lot. So you're ticking all the boxes that they say and a few more. Yep. And yet you're gaining weight. So what's going on? Well, presumably it's still got to be your fault. You're what? So you're lying about what you're eating, or you're secretly eating, because that's what it always comes down to, isn't it? Because we know the formula, we know what works, and so if it's not working for you, then you've got to be doing something wrong. But
I must be lying. Yeah,
time after time.
I must be in the hospital McDonald's shop all the time. So obviously there's this seed of doubt there that was just grumbling away, and I was visiting my parents one day, and my brother was there. My brother's 4 years older than me, and was exactly the same. But he said to me, "You should read this book," and he gave me the book. And it's because Gary Taubes wrote 2 versions, didn't he? One is the size of a bus, and the other one's more easily digestible. And he gave me the big one. So I read that, and that set me off on thinking about where to go and what to do next. But I didn't feel like there was a lot of support for it. Probably if I'd have gone looking, then I would have found the people who were people like Gary Towson, Peter Attia, and I would have found them and followed what they were doing. And I did a little bit, but I didn't do it myself. And I think at the same time, my brother, again, I'll thank my brother, he told me to go and watch Robert Lustig's long video, the first one that had millions of views and about the sugar being toxic.
Yes, it's brilliant video, isn't it?
Yeah, and my big brother put me in that direction, and so that set me off. But I just got bigger and bigger, and I was getting very down about it as well. And I went through a pretty rough couple of years. The last couple of years actually been pretty rough, and there's just having no direction, not very happy about anything. I was getting bigger and bigger, and it was starting to have an effect on what I wanted to do physically. And so I would go, because I could go out for a run and run for an hour and be okay with that. And yet I had friends who would say, I don't know how you can do that. I can't run for 5 minutes. And I think it's all in your head. Of course you can. And I didn't realize how tough it was for them, because for me, I could just go and do it. And all the time I had this thought, what could I actually do if I wasn't so big? What could I really achieve? And this year, actually, it was only just this year, just after Christmas, we were skiing, or I was snowboarding and the kids were skiing. We only live 10 minutes from a ski centre. So we're there all the time this year because the weather has been perfect ski weather. And the kids had gone off on their skis, and I was trying to catch up with them on my snowboard, and I got on a pommer and I just collapsed and fell off this pommer after we'd sort of gone only a few meters. And I tumbled down the hill, and at the bottom were a big long line of skiers waiting to get on the lift. And in front of them, I couldn't actually bend down and undo the bindings on my snowboard. And it's actually a bit emotional because it was rough. And I just sat there thinking, what's happened? Can't do this. So I thought, enough is enough. And we actually all went to the coffee shop for a coffee, because I thought, I'm not going back up there again. I'm going to the coffee shop. So we went there, and my husband said, do you want a cake? And I said, no, I do not want a cake. And that was, I've not had one since. And that was, as I say, just after Christmas, or it's probably February. And I haven't looked back. I've lost 28 pounds so far, but mostly it's been off my waist, and actually you can see it more than anything. And the scales do what they do, but it's quite a dramatic difference in me. And I am a lot happier.
Yes, there definitely is. I'm surprised hearing you talking about this, because I thought it was a longer period for the difference with the before and after pictures. You would imagine it was longer, because it is a dramatic difference.
The pictures that you're talking about, actually, which, I think the one that I've sent you was taken a few weeks ago. But the first one was only 14 weeks before that. So
Wow.
it's quite a dramatic difference. But it's just not just in how I look.
No.
The nurses at work have told me I'm a different person. They keep on saying, why are you dancing? Why are you so happy? Stop it. And I'm not doing it. I'm not walking into the room thinking I'm going to be happy now. It's just, I can't get over the difference. And there's so many other things as well. Daisy, you've heard all this before, but I'm just another one that, I have a PCOS, and fortunately, I was very lucky with that. It manifested very early on, actually. I didn't start my periods until I was maybe 17 or something. But I was very lucky in that I was able to, I didn't have fertility problems.
Yes, because that's the typical thing that affects most women with PCOS. Isn't it?
And again, I just didn't, my weight and all those issues surrounding, I say weight, but obviously there's an insulin resistance issue, wasn't affecting me in any way. And I think had 15 years ago, the PCOS been an issue for fertility, then maybe this would have happened earlier for me. But it didn't affect that. So I was very, very lucky in that regard. But I've always had horrendous trouble with sort of premenstrual depression, which actually led to a worse depression later on. I think that's where it all started. And then a few times it just didn't go away, It's just none of that as well. It's just crazy. What's really annoying is actually I've now got periods. I don't want them. Go away. It's great. It's wonderful. But actually, there's that. There's the mood issue, the mood aspect. Yes, my weight. And I've started running again. I did a run on Saturday, and it just felt great. I'm never going to compete. I'm never going to be winning any awards, but it's just how it's how it makes you feel. That's the best thing. And I think you can probably...
I was going to say, you must have seen, that must have been something you've seen a difference in. And you talked about that really low moment when, the physical aspect of getting bigger made doing the things that you enjoyed difficult. And so, you must have noticed a big difference with not only losing that bit of weight that had that impact, but like you were saying, giving you all the energy and helping with the mood. And I bet you're really looking forward to skiing season next year now.
Absolutely. Well, I made a promise. In fact, what happened after that as well was that I said to my husband and my girls, can you teach me to ski? Because I wasn't a skier. I was snowboarding, but I can't keep up with them on a snowboard. I haven't got the skills. So I said, you need to teach me to ski. And they started this year, but then the season ended and I can't wait to get back. And actually, after I did start and started to get fitter and lose some weight, started to feel better, my husband actually bought me some skis and boots and all the rest of it. And I can't wait to get out there and then show them what I can actually do. I don't know what that is yet, but we'll find out.
And that's what's really nice, isn't it? You just mentioned that the weight is, it's almost irrelevant apart from the fact that when it impacts what you want to be doing, it's all the other things. I mean, I can remember that when, and I was twice the size I am now, and just getting so frustrated with how difficult it was to do things. Like, I can remember having to unload some things off a truck and having to haul myself up onto it. But so you go to do something, because I had this weird thing although I spent, so many years being very overweight, I had this real mental block with refusing to accept how big I was physically with what I could do. So I would think, all I need to do is pull my hand out and haul myself up onto that. It's no problem. And so I would go to do that, envisaging it in my head, and then sort of, actually, I can't do it. I can't pull myself. So you then have to be, have to sort of somehow lever yourself up and roll yourself over. And all those, that's just the things that just used to drive me mad. Yes, I didn't want to look as big as I did, but it was more all the physical impracticalities of it that used to drive me round the bend, things rubbing and causing me pain and all those things. Yes. And they're the things that when they go away and when they get better, they're the things that really, really make your life so much better, aren't they?
And it's really easy to blame something else. I'm getting old. It's age, because that, my joints hurt because of my age. I'm not even 40. What am I talking about? It shouldn't be, but we all do that. But I think what you were saying before as well, there's a real mismatch, I think, between how we feel and how we maybe are physically. And you hear a lot of people saying when they look at before and after photographs, when they've become healthy and they've lost weight, and they say, I don't recognize that person. I didn't recognize that person then, and I don't recognize them now. It wasn't me, because we don't think like that. To me, I'm still that 18-year-old rugby player.
Yeah.
And I maybe I need to try and forget that now. But I do blame you. Blame other things. It's fascinating when you start thinking about all that stuff as well.
No, absolutely. And tell me more about what you do, because you work in the medical field, don't you?
Yeah, I'm a junior doctor. Don't be fooled by the grey hair. I'm a junior doctor and I work in orthopedic surgery. I was going to train as a GP, but actually I got an offer to go and train as a GP. I'd done all the early years as a junior doctor, and I pulled out because I couldn't face the frustration, which is another thing that I find really interesting now, because since then I haven't met, but I've come across the likes of David Unwin and people like that, and that, yeah. But at the time I can't do it. I cannot be a GP. It would drive me around the bend. So I didn't join the training program, and I haven't joined a training program to a point, although I work and train in orthopedic surgery, and I'm going to be doing some sort of initial surgical exams come the new year. That's the next thing on the agenda once I've got my master's out the way, which I'm also doing. And yeah, as I say, I'm pretty junior, so I don't have the influence really in terms of talking about nutrition and diet and what have you with patients, which I find quite frustrating, because I'd like to do something in that field. I'd like to help, be more help in that way, especially when I spend most of my time in the elective department. So we see a endless, I was going to say conveyor belt, but sometimes it does feel like that, of people coming for hip and knee replacements with osteoarthritis, and all other joint replacements. Mm-hmm. As a junior doctor in the department, one of my jobs is I see people when they come in before their surgery and get them, make sure everything's ready for their surgery. And often I go and help in theatre as well. So I'm assisting with what's going on in theatre, and then I'll see them afterwards and help with issues afterwards, like pain control and that sort of thing. And one of the things I do is look after their medications. So they come in and I have to make sure that we've got a proper up-to-date list of what they take. And one of my huge frustrations actually is the fact that I sit down and it's always the same. I could do it blindfolded. Every patient's on an anti-hypertensive, so they're taking drugs for their blood pressure. Every patient's on a proton pump inhibitor. They're taking drugs for their stomach. Every patient's on a cocktail of pain relief for their arthritis. We get, huge amount of people who are diabetic and they're on either diet controlled, which I just find is the funniest expression because it isn't, or they're drug controlled, or they're already onto their insulin. And I just see so much of it. And as I say, it's always the same. And I find it so frustrating because we're just not addressing those issues. And even if they did still need to come in for a hip or a knee replacement operation, all the other aspects of making that operation easier for them and their recovery easier, we just aren't addressing it. And I'm just finding that very, very frustrating. And so, yeah, I still get that frustration. I might not have it in
Well, it was interesting that I had a podcast recently where I interviewed Carrie Diulis, who's an orthopedic surgeon in the States. And she was saying there is a movement towards addressing diet and lifestyle because, and it's the insurance companies in part that are driving it, because they are seeing financial benefits to making those changes, makes the operations so much more successful and so many fewer problems afterwards, post-op. And so I wonder if perhaps, you will start seeing those changes in the UK as well, because, as you say, you list out those medications. I mean, for sure with your experience and what you see online with all these hundreds and thousands of other people, those list of complaints could be addressed so perfectly. And yes, it might be the case that for some of those people, they're not, going to need the operation, or maybe won't need it for a bit longer. But even if they do come in for the operation, it's going to be so much more successful and they're going to get so much more benefit and need fewer medications. And do you see any inklings of a change in direction? Because, you mentioned before about GPs, and, we've got some incredible leading lights now. You mentioned David Unwin, Aseem Malhotra, Dr. Chatterjee. There are some people, they really are making change. And there's political change starting, there's change in the media, and it really is happening.
I think professionally, no, is all honesty. I was told the other day that the system that GPs use to refer patients for these sorts of operations will actually have a button to press that if they can't say that their patient's BMI is below a certain point, then they won't get any further and they can't refer them. And I think that's really interesting because that then puts the responsibilities onto the GPs. And my question is, well, where does the responsibility lie? Does it lie with us? I mean, we've got big, long waiting lists because of all the issues within the NHS. We've got big, long waiting lists. So people come in, we establish that they need the operation. And then we say, well, we'll see you in 18 months. What could we be doing in that 18 months to help them prepare for this time when they're going to be in surgery? And as you say, improve their recovery, fewer infections post-op and all that sort of stuff. We can help that. We can prevent these things from happening. But whose responsibility is it? And when it comes down to insurance, it's almost easier to make that leap that it's a personal responsibility if you don't want to pay so much, or if an employer is paying for a group insurance, then they're going to be the ones pushing that agenda as well. But in the UK, with the big lumbering, slow to move NHS, whose responsibility is it and where do we go? And I think that's really interesting. I'd love to get my hands on our waiting list to see if we can introduce some sort of program. But I have to say that the programs that we're seeing and the progress, I think maybe is the word that we're seeing in this way, is very much directed towards the treatment of, in my opinion, it's very much directed towards the treatment of diabetes, particularly type 2, but I've seen David Underman's doing more in that way. No, the programs that are now licensed within the NHS or allowed to use are towards type 2 diabetes. And that's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. But I still think that there's way more scope in terms of the idea of prevention of type 2 diabetes and prevention of hypertension and osteoarthritis and gout and the list is endless, isn't it? Obesity and maybe even Alzheimer's, maybe even some cancers. Prevention of these things is going to become it needs to become the issue as well. Because I tell you what, I'm not diabetic, but I was heading that way, and I know I was heading that way. I could see it, I could feel it. My father actually developed a peripheral neuropathy years ago. And I said to him at the time, it's because you're diabetic. And he said, no, I'm not. My blood sugars are fine. I said, no, I bet you're diabetic. No, absolutely not. Blood sugars are fine. Of course, 2 years ago, I got a phone call. Guess what? Got diabetes. And I'm like, of course you have. Because we're so fixated on that number and you're not diabetic until you get that number of, your glucose is off. But we're not addressing it early enough. And it's people like me at the moment who need that help before it comes. And it's people like my children who need that help before they get to where I am. And I maybe have gone off track with where we started with that conversation. But yes, brilliant, absolutely brilliant thing happened. I had a patient at work who had been told a long time ago that she needed a knee operation, and she went away. And I was sitting in the office on my ward, and I heard one of the nurses on the phone to the kitchen, and she said, what are we going to feed this patient for breakfast? Because she says she's on a low-carb diet, and my ears pricked up. What? I listened to the conversation. The conversation ended a bit, well, there's nothing we can do, and the phone went down. And then I heard somebody say, you need to speak to Suzie. And there were some footsteps up the corridor, And I came out and I said, yay, this is brilliant. How can I help? And they said to me, this patient's come in. She says she's on a keto diet. She's been doing it a while. She's lost loads of weight, but she wants to continue doing it in hospital. Can you help? And can you advise her? And it was music to my ears. It was absolutely brilliant. And I had a long conversation with her. And she had gone and done that thing that we were just saying, I'd like to get my hands on the waiting list. She'd gone and done it herself. And I was actually off work then for a couple of days. And when I went back, I saw her and she said, you'll never guess what they gave me for breakfast. They made me bacon and eggs.
Perfect.
I was just, it was absolutely brilliant. So, the question I think was about whether or not healthcare professionals are beginning to take this on board. But people are doing it themselves, which is really interesting, isn't it?
I think that's part of the thing, isn't it? And the more it becomes patient-driven. I mean, Dr. Unwin talks about the story that was the part of what made him change his opinion, where it was that, it was actually a patient who said to him, well, surely bread is just glucose held together, that as soon as we digest it, it just breaks down into glucose in our bodies. There's no real difference. And he just, don't they teach you anything at medical school? And he just changed the way he thought and changed his track. And, yes, you're right. And the more it can come down from the top, but if it's coming up from the bottom as well, the NHS is 70 this year, isn't she? It's a big thing. And the NHS is something that we're all very, very proud of. But, she's at risk. She's under so much pressure, so much strain. And we know something that's going to, it's not necessarily going to answer all her problems, but it's going to alleviate so much stress.
Yes, indeed. But I think we treat the NHS the way we're treating diabetes, in that we know what's causing the problem. We're just going to feed her more and more of that, because the answer is to give money in the other end, to give the insulin or to give the money in the other end. The answer is not the problems coming in the first place. And more and more people are going to pick that up. But you're right, it does need to come from above as well, because you mentioned the Eat Well plate earlier. And I have 2 daughters. They're 9 and 10 years old, and they learn about this at school, and they come home and they show me what they were learning today at school. And there are people out there that say, nobody takes any notice of the Eat Well plate. It's all nonsense, because nobody does what they're told. And I think that's actually nonsense, because so many people are fed that way. So many people are in the institutions of school or work in huge companies like the NHS where they're fed, or they're in hospital, or they work for the armed forces, or they are in prison. All these people are actually being fed to that program, that Eat Well idea. So, and we know that all these, we know that sales of red meat have dropped. So people don't buy, I was going to say blue top milk there. People don't buy, nobody know what I mean. They don't buy full fat milk anymore. We know people aren't doing this. People are eating the way they're told to eat. And it's really tough talking to my girls, because they come home from school and they say, but the teacher said we should eat this. And I say, but I say you don't. And then there's this sudden realization that I don't agree with their teachers. And that's really tough discussion to have. But what you were saying earlier about have I noticed a change? I've been contacted by 2 friends who I was at medical school with in the last couple of weeks. We weren't at medical school in the last couple of weeks, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. They got in contact in the last couple of weeks, and they've said that they'd seen my blog, or they'd seen me ranting on Facebook, and they'd started themselves eating in this way. And now they're both GPs, they both have children, and their families were eating like this, and they were now telling their patients about it. And it's just the best message or email that I can get. I start jumping up and down. I go and show my husband, and he goes, "Oh, another one." I say, "Yes, another one." But these are the people that have the influence. They have patients who they can talk to in that way. And I love getting those messages, and I do seem to be getting more and more of them. It's nice.
That's what's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. From my professional point of view, I find it very hard to reach people, but I'm reaching more people from a personal point of view, which is
and
great.
Like you say, you don't know, how much that, I think it is going to change, little by little, not as fast maybe as we'd like it, but, and it is everything feeding in from different directions. And you were saying that people say they don't eat according to the Eat Well plate, but they do, and it is the general mainstay of what we believe. And I think most of us who've switched over to low carb have all had to go through that period of battling our ingrained beliefs, of battling against that fat is bad for you. We've had to push through that, because it has been so ingrained in us for so long. We have had to kind of fight against it. Mm-hmm. So you can sympathize with people who you speak to, and they think you're just a bit mad. So the more it does feed into the media, and it really is, it's being bounced around a lot now, isn't it? Keto is a bit of a trendy term, which has its pros and cons, but for the most part, I think it's a good thing, just because people start to get to know a bit about it, get to think about it. And yes, okay, a lot of these articles are saying, oh yeah, it's good for, a brief weight loss, it's not good in the long term, and all the rest of it. But that, that's just the start. And the more that people look at it properly and look at the proper science, hopefully, that will start changing.
We came down to see my parents this weekend, and we had a long conversation when I got in because they were very interested. And one thing I said to them was, have you ever seen me lose 2 stone in weight? And they both looked at each other and looked back at me and said, no, it's just not happened before. And I think just to show people the personal effect is enough to trigger people to go and look it up, then that's fantastic.
Exactly. And the more GPs that are on board, and yes, okay, you might still have to work within the confines of the NHS and what you're allowed to say and what you're not. But so you might not be able to be overt about it and push it onto, as many patients as you might like. But showing that you're aware of it and being supportive. I mean, my GP here is very supportive of what I do, and he can see in black and white the evidence of blood test results and things.
Yeah.
And he's interested and he's supportive, and he might not. I don't think it's the way he eats. I had to explain it to him, but he's supportive of what I do, and that's the important thing, isn't it? But if you can the more you can get GPs who are interested in themselves, do it themselves. And that's what I saw when I was at the conference in London. What was so exciting, how many GPs were attending and how that's filtering out. Because like you say, they're the influencers. They're the people who can really influence change on a large scale. And the more low carb at least becomes synonymous with reversing diabetes, but also, equals anti-inflammatory.
Yes.
As soon as it becomes known for being an anti-inflammatory diet, then of course it's naturally going to be applied to all the patients on your waiting list, because what do they need most with those kind of operations? They need to reduce inflammation, don't they?
I'm also a member of I think interestingly, I've heard another guest on your podcast, but I can't remember who it was. It was a while ago. Say in America, she was a physician in the US and a mum, and she was a member of this physician mums group in the US. And actually, there's one in the UK as well. It's very strong. There's a lot of people on it, and I'm a member of that. But actually, there's an offshoot of that, which was a weight loss club, I guess. And then there was an offshoot of that, which was intermittent fasting. And I joined that as well because I thought that's quite interesting. I'll see what people have got to say. There's a few hundred members in there, and it's not actually a low carb group, and it's not sold as one. It all just talks about intermittent fasting and I guess 5-2 as well. Michael Mosley's 5-2 and 18-6 and etc. fasting. But there's an awful lot of questions on there now. There's more and more questions about low carb, and people saying, well, what if I did that and the intermittent fasting? And quite often, actually, the admins will say, speak to Suzie, because I'll be the one on there saying, well, actually, yeah, this, that, and the other. But there are more and more people asking questions, and it's a great opportunity.
And that's where we're so blessed now, really, with the availability of information and support online. And like you say, when you started there, it was more difficult to come by that support. But now it's so easy. There are hundreds of Facebook groups. There's, the forum that we're a part of, but there are other forums as well. There are different membership sites like Diet Doctor. There's so many books. There's so many videos on YouTube. There are recipe books. We're spoilt for choice now. And that does make it a lot easier, doesn't it?
It's made a huge difference to me personally. It really has. As I said before, it was me and Gary Taubes and Robert Lustig. And as you read Gary Taubes' book, actually, and then you watch his lectures on YouTube, he talks about what he's written in the book. And I think I'd spent weeks reading that enormous book. I could have just watched the video, but there wasn't much else out there. And actually, there probably was, but I'm just kidding. But that's what it felt like. But now, when I started, I like Instagram, and I've used Instagram for a while, but I started a separate Instagram page because I didn't want to bombard my friends and family with my nutrition chat and my pictures of my dinner. So I started a new one, and just the support on there. And actually, that's not like Twitter, where you will get abused if you say anything on Twitter. You'll get abused for it because someone will have an opposite point of view. But on Instagram, people follow each other who have an interest in what each other are doing, and that has been a huge support. And it's hilarious to look back at my the last 4 months of my Instagram account, because on day 1 and then day 3, when I was sitting there with my head in my hands saying, what is wrong with me? I feel so ill. And so many people giving suggestions and then coming back and forth. And I do it as well for other people. There are people I follow who started at the same time, and to see their progress is just superb. So Instagram was really strong for me as well. And I remember of the ketogenic forums, the 2 Keto Dudes ketogenic forums, but I don't spend a huge amount of time there. Actually, funnily enough, the first time I put it on and the first post that came up was really laying into doctors. And I thought, great. And somebody else said, oh no, there are unicorns out there. And I thought, well, maybe I'm a unicorn. But I was a bit taken aback by that. And I haven't spent a huge amount of time there. I know that's not representative of the group. But there's the forums as well. And of course, the forum that you mentioned, which I find just a really nice, safe place to go and chat about anything, never mind keto related. It's just like-minded people having the same sort of problems and the same sort of success. And that wasn't there for me 8-10 years ago. And the fact that it's there now has contributed hugely to where I'm able to go now with this.
Exactly. It's tricky with the whole doctor thing. And I mean, I must admit, I've always had quite good relationships with my doctors, and those that I didn't, I just ignored. So, I mean, I completely ignored, for example, the dietitian after my weight loss surgery who told me to eat a third of baguette with every meal. And that was before I went low carb, but even before then, I thought that, well, this can't be right. I know I'm in France, but that is just insane. So, I just kind of ignored him, and because I had a good GP at home. I can understand people's frustration when they feel like their doctors are working against them. And I do understand that. But you're right. There are so many doctors out there who aren't like that. And I think at the root of it all, and I'm sure there are a few exceptions like there are with everything, but doctors went into their profession to help people, to make people well, and to make a difference. And to a certain extent, it's not their fault that the training they were given didn't encompass the knowledge that would actually be useful to help some of these patients. And when it is with their ongoing desire to keep learning that they are gradually changing and influencing others in their own profession, and it will change. And yes, it doesn't help to just, tarnish all doctors with the same brush, because it's not that way. And ultimately, if your doctor doesn't support you, usually you can change and find another one who will. And there are plenty out there who will. So
there are now as well. And you'll have probably heard this before elsewhere, but I remember my nutrition lectures at med school. When I say lectures, I'm pretty sure there was only one.
Yeah, one afternoon or something.
One afternoon, and it wasn't good. And I remember sitting there. Actually, I was excited to go because I was interested, and because I couldn't understand why people looked at food and drugs differently. Like, how are food and drugs different? There's something you ingest, and it's going to have an effect on your body. Therefore, what you eat is going to have an effect on your body, and a drug is going to have an effect on you. Why are we separating them out so much? I never understood that. So I was really interested to go to this afternoon, and we sat in this big lecture theatre. It was the whole class, and we had 2 lecturers stand at the front, and they showed us some pictures of some people that had successful weight loss surgery, actually. And then they sort of said things like, but it's really, really difficult, and nobody ever does what they're told, and you don't really, I don't know, we do what we do, but it's probably not great for you to get into this area of medicine. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, so that's that then. I'm not going there, because people don't do what they're told. People don't listen, and people don't do what they're told, so I'm not going to go into that sort of thing at all. And I don't believe that anymore. I don't believe that at all. People are interested in their own health and how to deal with it, but they've got to have the right tools and the right education. And we weren't told about any of this in med school. It was about treatments. It was about the disease and the treatment, and that was it. And I'm really disappointed in that. I'm really disappointed in that.
Exactly. And so how different would it be if, we talked before about all these things feeding in from different directions. How different would it be if during medical school the students were given exciting and innovative lectures, more than just one afternoon, about the impact of nutrition and different lifestyle choices, and got really fired up about it and saw it as part of a holistic approach? What kind of doctors and GPs and surgeons would that be churning out at the end of their medical degrees? What a difference that would make. So, all these changes have to come in.
It's a nice thought.
Exactly. But why isn't it happening?
Well, I think, to be fair, 10, 15, 20 years ago, had even that lecture been exciting and thrilling and get us all interested, it would have been about the Eat Well plate. It would have been about people need to eat less and move more. And it would have been about calories in and calories out. It would have been about where all the nutritionists and dietitians that have that education still now, it would have been that. So we still would have come out of it saying, you need to eat less and move more, and it's all your fault, or you're lying to me, wouldn't we? I think it's easy to look back on that now and say, what if we'd have taught them this? But I think hopefully it's going that way. And I think there might be some research going on out there at the moment about how what med schools are doing in terms of nutrition. And I know some medical students actually have taken it upon themselves. I can't remember which school it was, but they've taken it upon themselves to sort out the nutrition information that they get when they're at medical school. And it'd be absolutely brilliant to see where that's going and see if that makes a difference.
Exactly. So I think things are starting to change. Obviously, the time that's going to have the influence in a GP surgery is going to be 10 years down the line or whatever. But things are changing, and things like Aseem Malhotra challenging MPs in Parliament to try the Piopi diet, and the ones that exactly.
Seeing the picture of Tom Watson talking about that, I didn't recognise him until he said who he was. I thought, wow, that's amazing. And Aseem is we were talking before we started about being articulate and eloquent enough to sit and have this chat. And I still don't feel I'm being any of those things. But, he's got that in spades and the confidence to go and do that. And that's brilliant that he can use that.
He's very persuasive. Yeah.
And go and, sit having a cup of tea with, what was her name? Cox. Sarah Cox, is it?
Sarah Cox, yes. Yes.
That he's got doing it as well. And, he's certainly got the voice to be able to go and do that. And I think it's absolutely brilliant. He gets stick. He gets a lot of stick for it. As I said before, Twitter is, you say anything on Twitter, you'll get abuse, and he gets a lot of abuse.
Oh, yes. And he's had problems. He's had problems in his career. He spoke about that in the London conference. Really getting grief from his superiors when he expressed some of his views. But that's where change happens. I thought as soon as he was saying about that, he challenged, I think it was 120 MPs to do the Piopi diet, give it a chance, and to see how they felt, and then to turn that, onto how we deal with type 2 diabetes. Well, that is where change happens. If you can influence MPs like that, well, they're the people who will start actually implementing real change that will start filtering down, and with it coming up grassroots style from the bottom, hopefully eventually in the middle.
Yes.
we'll find a nice balance. Well, I think we've righted all the wrongs in the NHS and the UK in general. If only they would listen to us and do what we say, everything would be fine, wouldn't it?
Eloquent, articulate shouting about it. We just need to do lots of that, don't we?
Some keto protest marches. Anyway, it's been wonderful speaking to you today. It would be nice if we could round up with a top tip from you to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my top tip would be that the fantastic thing about keto and the keto community is this idea that you can experiment. But and you should be experimenting. You should try it, because it might not work for you. It might work for you. But what you need to do is understand that takes time. You can't just do an experiment for an hour. You need to keep at it for a week. And you know what? You haven't lost a week. If it doesn't work for you, you haven't lost a week, but you've learnt that it doesn't work for you, and don't go there again. I'm quite bad at not going there again, but you've got to accept that experimenting takes a wee bit of time. And, we've got time, because next week's going to come whether or not you try this experiment. And if it comes and you didn't try the experiment, you'll still not know what works for you and what doesn't. So give it a go. I'm going home next week from my parents' house. I'm going to go out to my cottage in the country. I've got to write my dissertation, which is due in at the end of the month. And I'm going to try a bit of carnivore between now and then, because I don't have my husband to feed, and I can be at home and I can do the cooking, and I'm going to give that a go. And you know what? At the end of that, if it doesn't work, I tried it. But I want to see how I feel, see how I go. And that's experimentation. That's the way to go.
I think that links back in nicely what you were saying towards the beginning of the podcast, how it actually took quite a long time for you to have that switch in your brain with the mindset that you just no longer wanted those foods that, are available to you all the time in your household for your kids and your husband, but that you don't want them anymore. But that didn't happen straight away. That actually took quite a long time. So you experiment to find what works for you, but then you really have to have that patience to stick with it before all the good things start happening.
When you've been doing something one way for 30 odd years, it's very hard to flick a switch and expect that that's going to change overnight. And you have to be patient with yourself. You have to look after yourself and be patient and understand that these things, nothing ever just happens overnight. And you'll find that most overnight successes have been trying for 10 years to get to where they want to be. And
that's very true. So it could happen quickly, but it could take a long time for that to happen. And we are all very impatient, aren't we? We all want it to happen very quickly. We've spent years and years putting on weight or ending up with type 2 diabetes or whatever it is, the position we found ourselves in, and all the habits have formed for all those decades, and then we want to just fix them overnight. It is a very natural thing, isn't it? But it is.
I'm going to be very, very patient with myself when we go to France, when we're going across to France in August, and I have a funny feeling that a croque monsieur might find its way through. But we have to be patient with ourselves.
Well, you'll see and you'll learn, and I don't know. I hazard a guess that it's going to be similar to your eclair experience. You'll build it up, and it's something you've got to try, but you'll be a bit, actually, I'm not sure why I bothered. But actually, what it will serve to do is reinforce all the good beliefs you have. So
perhaps, yeah. So it's an experiment I might try.
Let me know what happens. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you today. Thank you very much, Suzie.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having a chat. I hope I was, what was the words? Articulate and, see, I can't even remember the words now. I've got to be...
Articulate and eloquent.
Yeah. Oh, dear.
Perfect. Well, enjoy your holiday in France.
Thank you very much. Really looking forward to it.
To get the resources and links from the show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you want to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. If you fancy joining me on this exciting adventure and want to help me create new episodes, please go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/ketowoman, or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman podcast website. It's thanks to the two keto dudes that I'm hosting this podcast. So please consider heading to their Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com and help them bring you more podcasts like this one. Please help other people hear about and find this podcast by reviewing the show on iTunes and Facebook. Every star and review really does help. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. This week's quote is from J.K. Rowling. We do not need magic to change the world. We carry all the power we need inside ourselves already. We have the power to imagine better. Bye-bye, Keto Lovelies.